This is Grace Notes. I'm Alan Button, and pleased to have as our guest today Dr. Matt Harmody. Matt, well, there's a lot we could say about Matt. He's got a background that is especially varied, but most recently, Matt has worked in emergency services, retired not long ago after 25 years in the Sandhills region of North Carolina, but his story begins a good bit before that. Matt, let me, before I ramble on, say welcome.
Thank you, Alan. I'm glad to be here.
Well, we appreciate your taking the time to come in. Maybe, Matt, what you could do is, for the benefit of our listeners, start with Cleveland. How does that fit into your story?
Born and raised in Cleveland, Ohio. I grew up there in a family of two siblings and parents. Did all my schooling in Cleveland up through high school, and then moved down to Cincinnati for some undergraduate work, and then back to Cleveland to start my career as a chemical engineer.
Having studied engineering as an undergraduate?
Yes.
And along the way, I'm told, getting an MBA as well.
Yes. At the time, my father gave me my career advice as going into engineering, working for a large company for 40 years, and then retiring with a golden parachute. So I saw that MBA as a necessity to pursuing that career, at least at that time.
Uh-huh. Well, and I guess the question very quickly raises itself. How do you get from there to 25 years of emergency room services?
Yes, a somewhat long story, but I think it...
Well, give us the summary version, if you would. We want to hear that story.
Yeah, so I'm a sophomore, 19 years old at school, and I received an unforgettable phone call from my mom. My father, who often didn't like to be told what to do, was finally dragged to the Cleveland Clinic by my mother, very sick. And it was determined that he had complete renal failure. In other words, his kidneys stopped working, and he was being put on emergent dialysis. So that was quite a shock of a call to receive about my father, who was very healthy, very active outdoorsman, hunted, fished, and just completely upended his life and the life of our family.
And that led eventually to your interest in medicine. And by the way, I might add, just not to keep everyone in too much suspense, Matt has been very involved with kidney-related enterprises, both personally and more broadly. So go ahead, Matt.
Yeah, so that's the first point in, I guess, what some people would call my chronic kidney disease journey. My father was on dialysis for a number of years. He had great difficulty continuing in his profession as an attorney. His general health significantly declined over that period of time. And like I said, it just completely upended his world. He eventually reached a point in his life after about 9 years of dialysis that it was just untenable for him to live that type of lifestyle. It was completely draining. He was required to go to dialysis appointments 3 times a week, 4 hours each.
Uh-huh.
And it was just completely draining for him. And he eventually chose not to continue with that type of lifestyle and withdrew care and passed away at 59. His kidney failure occurred at age 50. I learned a lot about dialysis and chronic kidney disease during that time. There were a lot of similarities between chemical engineering and dialysis. I was able to teach my father and my family a little bit about that process. And that left such an impact on me that it caused me to go back to medical school at age 30. I would also add that my father did not want to consider a living donation from a family member at the time. He felt very strongly that he had led a full life and he didn't want to jeopardize someone else's life. So that always stuck with me, and again led me to go back to medical school. Fast forward some 25 years later, as you had mentioned, Alan, I saw dialysis patients as an emergency physician about every day, and each of them reminding me of my father and what he went through and the difficulties he had just with routine daily life. That each of those folks reminded me of my father and what he had gone through, and I wanted to make a difference in somebody's life. I certainly felt that that was a missed opportunity with my father, to donate a kidney to him. So back in 2017, I decided to donate a kidney to a stranger, feeling that I could at least make a difference in someone's life.
Which, as I understand it, donating to a stranger is pretty unusual. Tell us more about your motivation and why.
Yes, the unusual part about that is roughly 25,000 kidney transplants occur in this country each year, and about 6,000 of those are living donors. The rest are deceased donors. And of that 6,000, only about 300 are what are called non-directed donors. In other words, donating to a stranger. And yet that process was pretty straightforward. I returned to my residency training program, that being UNC Chapel Hill, and went through a very extensive evaluation, both medically and psychologically, and was approved to be a donor. And that occurred, like I said, back in 2017.
I want to hear more about your own personal background and involvement with kidney advocacy-related matters. But before we go there, tell us about this first song you've selected. Why Prepare Ye the Way of the Lord?
That song probably summarizes 95% of my artistic experience and talents. It was part of a 8th grade musical. Our graduating class was 56, I believe, and probably half of us were involved with the production. Mostly the guys were behind the stage, but about 8 of us were brave enough to be on stage. It took the audience through several time periods of music, starting in the Roaring 20s. We learned the Charleston and other dances throughout all those different time periods, as well as songs.
That sounds like it was a real blast.
It was a lot of fun. Took some courage, and it clearly was stepping outside my comfort zone. I was the only male to sing a solo, and I was on stage by myself, climbing out of a large trunk in the dark until the spotlight was turned on me.
And this, by the way, is a song from the musical Godspell.
Yes, that production's become near and dear to my heart, but I think they felt it was short enough and easy enough for someone with little to no musical ability to be able to get through it. Well, that was, I sung that with my heart up in my throat. And gosh knows how high my heart rate was. But I accomplished that with a lot of support from our teachers and classmates. The musical is based on the gospel according to Matthew. And it's always been very meaningful.
Your name, by the way, is Matthew, isn't it?
That's right. And we named our first son Matthew as well. So, yes, I love the musical, love the music, and I have had no successful musical career come out of that experience.
Well, you mentioned stepping out of your comfort zone. I gather that that's been sort of a theme, or at least something that people might observe about you in your life more broadly. Is that fair?
I think that yes, absolutely fair. I think we grow as people by taking on new and different challenges, and we learn more about those challenges, and sometimes they're failures, granted. So that was clearly an example at a very young age, but nonetheless, I think maybe it sets stage for other opportunities to do that. Going back to medical school at age 30 and competing with a class full of 22-year-olds right out of undergrad was another challenge, being away from studying for that many years. Did not come easy to me. Stepping into a career in emergency medicine where every day is different and you deal with a lot of uncertainty. And the mantra is that we are jacks of all trade, but masters of none. So you rely on a lot of help from other, medical colleagues. But sometimes you're the only doctor in a community, especially our rural community, that's available to care for a patient. So that requires a certain level of comfort and willingness to step outside your comfort zone. I would say my kidney donation was a little bit along those lines as well. I never spent a night in the hospital, at least as a patient, up until that point. And while the surgery was very straightforward, I went home essentially on time and recovered fully. Stepping outside the box, certainly that would fall into that category.
We'll hear more, Matt, in just a little bit. Great introduction to the song. Let's hear it. Prepare Ye the Way of the Lord from the Godspell movie soundtrack.
Prepare ye the way of the Lord.
That was Prepare Ye the Way of the Lord from the Godspell musical movie soundtrack. If you're just joining us, our guest today is Dr. Matt Harmody. Matt, among other things, is a kidney donor personally and retired not long ago from many years as an emergency services physician. And I might add, because we're going to come to it shortly, the husband of Susan. Matt, let's pick up, if we could, on the kidney donation theme and emergency services, for that matter. As I think about what you have done in donating a kidney and working for so many years in emergency services, it strikes me that you've got a real priority for life, preserving it, sustaining it, and as you mentioned to me before we came into the studio, doing what you can to enhance quality of life. Is that fair?
Yes, I think that's a good summary. I think we are all put on this earth to help each other and improve each other's lives. And I've had that very unique opportunity, especially in emergency medicine, to touch people's lives oftentimes when they're at their lowest points. And they often don't get to choose who their physician is when they have to unexpectedly come to the emergency department. So it's been a privilege and honor to do that type of work in our community for that many years.
Have you seen people die in the emergency room?
Yes, unfortunately. And that is such a critical point in so many people's lives, including family members. And again, in those difficult circumstances, often found myself having to talk to patients if they're able to speak for themselves, or family if not, about their end-of-life decisions. And it was always very challenging. Each one of us has their own decisions about end-of-life, but that wasn't my place to impart my personal feelings. I fully wanted to hear from the patient or their family their expectations and to try to meet those expectations as best I could under their circumstances.
Well, it strikes me that with that attitude and that perspective, that you were very likely a great comfort to the families going through that.
I would like to think so, but I hopefully was able to make a difference in their lives, as was the whole team in the emergency department. It's not just a single physician. It's the help of nurses, other staff, consulting physicians, all working together to especially at the end of life, to make a difference collectively for that patient and their family.
I met someone recently who told me that she had spent part of her career in hospice, and that was one of the most satisfying parts of her career. And it strikes me, as I told her, that it takes a really special person to do that, be involved in that in a way that makes a difference to her as a caregiver and to the people whom she's serving.
I would completely agree with that vignette. Anyone that you meet that has worked in hospice is a special person, without question.
Tell us about this next song that you've selected, Matt. Don't Know Much by Linda Ronstadt, a duet with Aaron Neville. Why that song?
I had a very limited music exposure growing up. My parents were more into kind of big band, classical music. So they were what most people would probably consider nowadays pretty restrictive on what they allowed their children to listen to. I became interested and loved to listen to Linda Ronstadt. And
Your parents allowed that?
Yes, and I believe my first two albums, yes, those are albums that I purchased as a teen, were of Linda Ronstadt's, and I was allowed to play them on my dad's very fancy audio system that I had to be very careful with, lest I break something. So that always had a special place in my heart. And then my wife and I have been married 30 years as of last August. And thinking back to 1997 when we were married, and actually married in the same week that I started medical school, and choosing our first dance song, that's where this song is most memorable to me, is two of us coming together and sorting through a relatively long short list of potential songs, but deciding on that one was very special.
Let me make sure I got the dates right. You said 30 years last August, but 1997?
I'm sorry, 1997 was medical school graduation.
It was kind of a blur
Yes.
in your life at that time, I gather.
Well, yeah, so August 1993.
Gotcha.
Started medical school on a Monday, was married on a Friday night.
Oh, boy.
Delayed our honeymoon till that spring the following year when I had my first reasonable break. And we also bought and sold houses right in amongst that period of time. So not necessarily recommended, but that was what the situation called for, and we're probably stronger and better compatible mates because of that experience.
And this song says it all, I gather.
Yes, it absolutely does.
Don't know much, but I know I love you. Let's hear it. Duet by Linda Ronstadt and Aaron Neville, and we'll send this one out to Susan.
Look at this face. I know the years are showing. Look at this life.
Matt, you're involved in advocacy with regard to kidney matters. Tell us what your involvement is. What are you doing in that area?
I am involved in several areas that relate to different aspects of kidney donation advocacy, and I think maybe going from smaller to larger, maybe just in the number of people impacted, not necessarily the importance. I first serve as a mentor for potential kidney donors. So those folks that express an interest in donating a kidney, sometimes it's to a stranger like I did, but oftentimes it's to a family member or friend. I help them navigate the process. It's quite an extensive evaluation. Our organization feels that being able to speak with someone that has walked in those shoes previously provides the best opportunity to educate. We're non-medical, despite my background, but of course, each person has their medical team able to answer medical-related questions.
You mentioned an organization, and I think that may go to a question I had, and that is, how do you get connected with these people?
So our organization is called the National Kidney Donation Organization, and most people come in through a sister organization called the National Kidney Registry. So that organization works to match living donors with those in need of a kidney. They have a very extensive algorithm. They work with over 100 transplant centers in the country. And anytime you go to a particular link, which can be provided by someone that's on dialysis that's in need of a kidney, that automatically processes through the system and ends up with our organization. So we offer mentors to those folks that are pursuing potentially becoming a kidney donor.
So is the mentoring then by Zoom or telephone, or how do you do that?
All the above.
I see.
Yes, and I've mentored people from Maine to Utah to Florida. And it's fascinating to hear people's stories and what's brought them to their kidney donation journey at that point.
Tell us what other advocacy efforts you're involved with.
So next would be locally here in town. So we have started a chronic kidney disease support group. So chronic kidney disease would include anyone that's early in stages of kidney disease, just being monitored by their primary care provider, all the way up through needing dialysis and being on dialysis. It also would potentially involve both kidney donors and recipients. So we're trying to be all-inclusive. We just had our first meeting last month, and it's been a great experience so far. We've just gotten started. I have two colleagues that are both kidney recipients that are probably going to run with it once we get it off the ground, but we're off to a great start.
And you're involved in advocacy at the federal level too, as I understand it.
Yes. So speaking of projects that I'm involved with that I may or may not see the end result in my lifetime, it's completely the opposite of emergency medicine, whereas decisions are being made by the minute and numerous important decisions made within very short time periods, sometimes simultaneously. To, if anyone's ever done work at the federal legislative level with Congress.
I was going to say, what you have just described is not the way we understand Congress operates.
It's almost the exact opposite. It's great to learn new things and have new experiences. Speaking of stepping outside your comfort zone, this is completely new to me, but I serve as mostly a subject matter expert for an organization of which I'm a principal of called the Coalition to Modify NODA. And our goal is to increase incentives and also remove disincentives, for that matter, of people being able to donate a kidney.
And that's NOTA as in NOTA.
Yes, and that stands for the National Organ Transplant Act. So briefly, back in 1984, Congress passed that law and established a lot of criteria for transplant centers, and it was very involved with respect to setting up an organized transplant center system in this country. So most interesting to us is the aspect of part of that law that states that no one can receive what's called valuable consideration for organ donation. So we feel that that really needs to be eliminated. We have struggled with increasing living donation numbers in this country. It's been about the same level for the last 20 years. And even at that time when that legislation was passed, there was comment in the debate in the halls of Congress saying that if this is unsuccessful as currently written, that we should strongly consider incentivizing donors through compensation and other models.
Tax credits, for example.
Yes, and that's the premise of our proposal. So here we are 40 years later without a significant improvement in the number of donors, and the waiting list for donation for people in need has doubled over that period of time. So we have had about 80 congressional office meetings to this point. And I think we're on the verge of getting sponsors lined up. And hopefully,
legislator sponsors.
Yes, and hopefully that will be introduced in Congress. We feel that it's bipartisan. We've worked hard to talk to a lot of people, a lot of experts. You can go to our website online and see that there's a lot of supporters, both transplant surgeons, recipients, donors. It falls under the definition of insanity. We have been doing the same thing over and over for a long period of time without a different result and expecting one. So I think this, again, the theme of thinking outside the box and doing things that might be a little uncomfortable for people, but that's how we grow. And there's such a need for living organ donation in this country that we really think that that will make a difference.
Your advocacy efforts, as I understand it, also involve some adventure and maybe a book. And just so you don't have to start fresh, I understand all 50 states have some connection with your adventure and the book.
Yes, in an attempt to spread the word for the need for organ donation, and also to show that people that have donated a kidney go on to lead the same active lives that they led before donation. And there's really no physical limitations. A team of 5 living kidney donors got together and attempted to set the Guinness World Record for the fastest time to summit the highest points in each of the 50 states.
And you were included in that group.
Yes, so we had 3 climbers and 2 support people. So I was one of the 2 support people, so I helped provide medical care as the climbers and really anyone on the team needed. I spent a lot of time driving the RV, shopping for food, getting work done on the RV, redoing logistics a million times over as conditions changed. Yes, it was quite an experience.
And you have set the record, as I am told.
Yes, we finished 41 days and change, and we received official confirmation from Guinness. So that was a real thrill. It was just a once-in-a-lifetime experience. There was actually 6 of us. We had a videographer that joined us that was documenting the whole trip and also became a very instrumental part in getting us through all 50 states in the short time that we needed to do so. My fellow crewmate, so we basically alternated between driving and sleeping and caring for the team, has a background in library science, and I'm sure is the more gifted of the 2 of us in writing. So we've agreed to co-author the book.
Gotcha.
And we're knee-deep in writing these days.
The book is in the works.
It is. Again, another new experience for me, another growth opportunity, stepping outside the box, stretching your limits a bit, and having some new experiences.
Well, Matt, we're short on time, So tell us, if you would, about this third song you've selected, Crazy for You by Madonna. Why that song?
I've grown to appreciate people that have different experiences in their lives, and I believe Madonna is about my age. And I remember
having had quite different experiences from you.
Yes. I remember reading a biography that was written early in her life about her growing up in Detroit and at age 18 moving just coldly to pursue a career in music to New York City. And I thought how different her life experiences have been versus mine. So I really just grew up to appreciate her music and some of the limits that she pushed. I not necessarily agree with all of them, but I hope I'm open-minded enough to be able to say that that's acceptable in our society. The most personal part of that story is that this would be the second point in my illustrious musical career in which I serenaded my wife that song when we were walking out on a trail somewhere in Anchorage, Alaska. The background is we had met within several weeks before she was assigned a 6-month post in Anchorage, Alaska. We were both working for the same company in Cleveland, and that put an early strain in our relationship. And I finally had the opportunity to go out and visit her for a week or so in May. Of course, I waited till it warmed up a bit. She went out there in the winter, which is not a pleasant place to be, with darkness basically 24/7. We were just enjoying each other's time so much, and I think somewhat falls under the guise of, distance makes the heart grow fonder, and it's the only time I've sung otherwise. And of course, we were alone together, and I had a very understanding audience of one.
Just you and Susan and the polar bears, huh?
That's right, exactly. So that's the basis for that third and final choice.
From 8th grade to a serenade in Anchorage, Alaska.
That's right.
Very good. Well, Matt, it's been a real treat to have you here. Thank you again for taking the time, and we certainly wish you well in your continued kidney donation advocacy efforts.
Thank you, Alan. I appreciate the opportunity to speak with you today.
Let's hear it. Crazy for You by Madonna.
Swaying room as the music starts, strangers making the most of the dark. Crazy for